Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Catherine Fleming Bruce, and I'm joining you from Columbia, South Carolina. We have a wonderful evening for you with some of our Democratic nominees from here in South Carolina and other parts of the country. I'm doing this effort with an organization called Swing Left, and their intent is to make sure that we do everything we can to have a House and Senate Democratic majority every year. So they're doing this work year round. Right now, we're doing it in mind with the 2022 election in mind. And we want to have some conversation with our candidates about why they think it's important to have a Democratic majority in the House. Today, we're only talking to House candidates, and also to talk about how they think they might work with their colleagues in the Senate. And if we don't get that a House Democratic majority, what they think will happen. So the folks who are with us today are our two Democratic nominees in South Carolina. So we have a Democratic nominee for South Carolina Congressional District 1, Dr. Annie Andrews. Hi, Annie.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for being here and thank you for your time. And then we have Judd Larkins, who is Congressional District 2's Democratic nominee. Hey, Judd.
Hey there, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me on. Glad to be able to be our second person representing Columbia, South Carolina tonight on here.
Yeah, so glad to have you both. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the majority in the Senate. Now, right now, in the House, right now we enjoy a Democratic majority in the US House. However, that appears to be threatened. There's some prediction that maybe we might not be able to keep that House majority. So I wanted to have some thoughts from both of you about what you think might happen if that House Senate majority is lost, and what we might do to make sure that doesn't happen. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll kick it off. Catherine, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a pediatrician and a mom, and that is why I'm running for Congress. And I'm running for Congress because everything is on the line. If we don't keep the House, if we lose the Senate, I am so fearful about the future of this country. I think the number one issue on everyone's mind is restoring women's reproductive freedom. We don't even have to imagine what will happen if we lose the House and the Senate. Lindsey Graham made it crystal clear yesterday that they are going to move forward with a national abortion ban. And as a woman and a mom of two daughters and a physician, I understand that that is deeply dangerous anti-science, anti-woman legislation, and our country cannot afford that. And I am so grateful to be running in this moment because I feel that I need to speak up for my daughters and their future. We will go backwards on women's reproductive rights. We will go backwards on climate change. We will potentially lose our democracy if we don't hold the House and the Senate. It is not hyperbole to say that everything is on the line. And you just mentioned that we hold a majority in the House right now. And that is why we have seen such meaningful legislation passed and signed into law. I am a gun violence prevention researcher, and that is the issue that got me involved in my community, is the fact that gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in this country. And I was overjoyed when the bipartisan gun safety bill was signed into law by President Biden. We have so much more work to do on that issue to protect our children and all of us, to keep us safe in our schools and our communities. And if we lose the House and if we lose the Senate, we are going to go backwards on that issue as well, and we cannot afford to do that.
Now, you said something that was very interesting about children and gun violence. I want to make sure we underline that statement. What is the threat to children and gun violence right now?
Yeah, so in 2019, gun violence became the #1 cause of death for children in the United States. For decades, motor vehicle collisions have been the #1 cause of death, but over the past 20 years, we've had a steep decline in deaths by motor vehicle collisions because we've taken a comprehensive public health approach that has included a lot of really popular legislation, but we haven't done the same thing on gun violence. So in 2019, on our watch, gun violence became the #1 cause of death for children in this country. This is school shootings, but more importantly, it's the community daily gun violence that so many of the youth in this country experience every single day. They go to bed and they hear gunshots out their windows. They don't have a safe place to sleep at night. And it is also youth suicide. So those mechanisms of firearm death combined have again made it the leading cause of death for children in this country. As a mother and as a pediatrician, that is not okay with me. And I will continue to fight as hard as I can and for as long as I have to until that is no longer the leading cause of death for kids in this country.
My goodness. Well, Judd, what are some of the things that really concern you with regard to joining the Congress, joining the U.S. House, and bringing some issues that are important to you?
Yes, definitely, Catherine. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Andrews, for that. Definitely want to echo what Dr. Andrews mentioned. I live just a few miles from the State House. So every time we've had a lot of rallies there, obviously, ever since Dobbs came down, and I've been able to attend most of them and talking with individuals. And these are groups that come from all walks of life, all ages, all religions, just all sitting there. Like Dr. Andrews said, it's been laid out what's going to happen. This isn't the will of the people. We've seen the studies coming out about Republican women being up in arms about it here. And obviously they're not as vocal, especially in South Carolina, sometimes due to cultural issues. But it is important that if we keep the House, we get something done with this. We need to use this opportunity because we've seen over the last 49 plus years, when you've had the opportunity to get something done, you need to get it done. And I know the Senate has a few obstacles in their way to that, but I'm sure that the way the polls are looking now, they're going to have more than a mandate to make some changes to make sure we get stuff passed here, hopefully with reproductive rights and as well with some additional gun control things, because that, especially that topic, I do a lot of canvassing out in Lexington and Aiken County. These are rural areas. People are on the same page with this. You know, everybody, it seems now, the majority of Americans are on board with these common sense gun regulations because everyone wants their kids to feel safe at school, their loved ones to feel safe when they go out to a grocery store or just out to a parade. Folks are tired of being unsafe in their own communities. But then a few things that are a little more maybe specific to my district. The 2nd district covers a wide area of rural communities. We're talking communities with 1 or 2 stoplights. I actually grew up in a rural community of 96, a little north of the district. We had 2 stoplights and a Hardee's and a Subway, and that's what you had to eat.
Yeah.
So I visit a lot of these communities, and one important thing about keeping the majority of both houses is so that we can continue investing in these communities. We need more broadband. We need it rolled out quicker. I'm telling you, quicker as well. So many communities, broadband will go down the main road, but in these rural areas, folks live off of the road, sometimes half a mile. You have to bring it to them. Cell towers are a big deal. Whenever I travel the district a lot on the weekends, especially going out to Barnwell and Aiken County, I don't have cell service for half of my drive. So you can just imagine the inconveniences for a campaign trying to operate, let alone someone that actually lives there trying to operate a business or check on loved ones.
Right.
So definitely need to keep investing in that. And another thing is making healthcare more accessible. Telehealth is a lifesaver to these communities. We have 1 county out of the 5 in this district of Barnwell County does not have a hospital, does not have an OBGYN. You're talking, if you need a hospital, it's an hour's drive up to Aiken or Augusta, or you got to be airlifted. And that's a massive cost. And not to mention just your, kind of normal checkups, going to a general practitioner or other things you just don't have available in these communities. And we're talking a wide area, tens of thousands of folks once you start adding them up. So we need to make sure all of this stuff is available to them. I'm a small business owner. I have a donut shop, used to have some grocery stores. Some of these downtowns are just the prettiest downtowns you've ever seen here, quintessential Southern towns. Some of them are filled up with coffee shops and antique stores. Some are falling in disrepair, and you're talking 3 or 4 miles apart. So we need to invest in these small businesses, because right now all they're getting is maybe a Dollar General, and Dollar General does not provide the food needed. It does not provide other necessities. So folks are driving 30 minutes one way for groceries. Whenever gas is expensive, that's tough. Folks are on a fixed income out here. A lot of people are elderly. They can't drive. This is a half a day affair to get milk and eggs now. That's how bad it is in these areas. So if we can keep both, we can continue to invest. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in this race, is to make sure that we keep the focus on bringing up all communities, because you shouldn't have to live without just because you choose to live on a farm or in a small, quiet town.
Well, you know, it's a great contrast to have the two of you talking today, because Annie represents what we might call a more, more citified, communities, more wealthy communities mixed with some others mixed in, and yours is the more rural. Certainly where I live in Columbia, and you don't live far from me, if I had to walk to a hospital, I can actually walk to several hospitals.
Yes, you can. Yep.
So the idea of not having a hospital in your county is just mind-boggling. I can't imagine that. So to have our folks in Congress to allow that to happen, we know that our state folks are on the front lines, but our folks in Congress help provide the resources to make these things happen. And the fact that people don't have these resources here is very telling. Is very telling indeed. So we have Charleston, and of course Charleston is also the place where Mother Emanuel is, and where the killings happened that so many of us remember from 2015, which made big changes to some degree, but we still are faced with problems of racial inequity and racism. So how do you think you would, how would you do the work in Congress if you have a Democratic majority of addressing that issue of racial imbalance and racial inequity? So let's start with Annie. What are you hearing from folks in the Charleston area, and what would you bring to that conversation?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, the Mother Emanuel shooting shocked the nation. It was horrific, racially motivated killing. And I think we can be really clear about where the GOP stands on issues like that, because our supermajority in Columbia of Republicans refused to pass a hate crimes bill. Yeah. Now that's a state issue, but we are one of one or two states left without a hate crimes bill. And the Mother Emanuel shooting happened in our state. And that is shameful, that is embarrassing. And it is not a priority for the GOP to address racial inequities in any way. And I think that is the most basic way to look at it when you're coming from South Carolina, that we don't even have a hate crimes bill because the Republicans can't get on board with that. I would be incredibly privileged to represent the Low Country in Congress. And I know, especially through my work in gun violence prevention and through my work at the Children's Hospital, where I get the opportunity to care for children all up and down the coast, from all walks of life. And I get to provide the same level of quality healthcare, regardless of the child's skin color, regardless of how much money the parents make, regardless of what zip code they were born into. So that is the world that I have the privilege to work in now, and I will carry that with me to Congress. We have one party who won't even recognize that there are ongoing racial inequities in this country. Yes. And we have another party who's willing to actually roll up their sleeves and do the hard work of repairing the damage that was done by our legacy of slavery in this country, which was centered in my district. Mm-hmm. And we are represented currently by a woman who has no interest in talking about that issue, no interest in addressing these issues. So we first need someone up there who's willing to recognize that this should be a priority for our district, and recognize that it is an incredibly damaging, ongoing issue in the state of South Carolina and beyond, and we need to get serious about it.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for that. Judd, what are your thoughts? I know you're, again, going into those rural communities all over your district. What are the things that you're hearing from folks, and what would you be bringing to Congress to address the issue of racial inequity?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing you need to do is you got to be a representative of all of your district. This district is a little bit unique. It is 75% Caucasian, but there is an area, I have put our Orangeburg County down, Highway 321, that's like North Nices, Norway. These, again, small towns, mainly African-American communities that were once vibrant, but now they're struggling to retain jobs, small high schools with no resources. So one thing that I think we need to do is a representative needs to be present in all of these communities, not just communities that either he feels comfortable in, or maybe currently with my opponent, ones that he gets most of his votes in. Because just a few weeks ago, the town of Norway down in my district, very, very southern end, which is still only maybe a 40-minute drive from the current representative's home, had an issue with a sewer pump. Everybody in the town went several days without being able to flush their commodes or anything. And it's because the infrastructure is just aging. And they had to spend, I think the number was like $12,000. I texted with the mayor to see what I could do down there. But it was like a $12,000 fix, just about $12,000 fix. Now, granted, in a time of crisis, it's not like you can get a congressional bill down, but you still need a representative that's willing to make the phone call other people to see what they could do, see what they can lend their microphone to. And that's by caring about all of these communities, making sure to be seen in them. There's places that mainly these smaller towns where the towns will be more predominantly African-American, the surrounding countryside a little more Caucasian, but actually in the town, you'll ask them, when was the last time that you saw a Representative Wilson in the town of Sally? And they'll look at you and be like, never. I can't remember. And he's been a representative now for 21 years. So you're talking about he's not visible, places that are 30, 40-minute drives from his current residence that are pretty drives, to be honest, and great hamburger joints on the other end.
Okay,
so it's like,
put those in the chat.
But you have to be present in these communities. You have to get out and walk. We got areas, the West Columbia part around the famed Brooklyn Baptist, that it's like you have to just be out visible in those communities, show you care, show up for that rec league, show some genuine interest in them outside of just election time, and then go back, try to help them out with the resources that they need. And when the bills come up in Congress, vote for them. I've been speaking with an individual who is, very nervous about the Senate passing his right for gay marriage. It passed the House, but his representative, the gentleman is actually of the same party as the representative. He didn't vote for it. So you got ones to where even if you brought it up a little bit, it's because I sometimes have to broaden it up because of the district that I'm running in. But it's like we need to have respect for other people, and we need to make sure that the American dreams and the rights and liberties of being an American are actually open to all Americans, regardless of where you live. Catherine, you know very well from a lot of your research and stuff that there's areas of Columbia that are still struggling to catch up, struggling to catch up from segregation or research it, or resources flying away, or just, building that's made it just hard to live in, expensive to live in. We need to pass policies that, ease this burden on those people, make sure they can, age gracefully in their homes, because a lot of them are older people that, fixed income, taxes go up because of all of the new development around. It's hard to stay in your home. That's a major issue in this district and around the country. So we just need to, realize that, we're out here chasing votes right now, obviously. But then after November 8th happens, and I get to serve alongside Dr. Andrews, we need to make sure that, listen, we represent roughly 750,000 people, and we represent all of them. We should care about all of them. We're not going to agree with most of them half the time, or all of them sometimes, but we still have to show we care and they got a voice, and then see what's going on in the communities and actually not to be afraid to address it, even if that means going against some folks on your own side sometimes.
Exactly, exactly. Now I want to take a moment to say that both of these candidates really need your financial support. And I'm really amazed and appalled to hear how millions of dollars of PAC money are being sent to Georgia, to North Carolina races, to all of these races, House and Senate. And that's what has to be fought against. The fact that we have these big pockets who want to continue to invest in the GOP agenda. So it's up to the public, it's up to each of us to give what we can, to make those recurring donations to the campaign. So if we can have real quick, what is the best way for people to donate to both of you?
So yes, thank you for that, Catherine. It is, our campaigns are fueled by donations, and I'm not taking corporate PAC money. My opponent takes all the money she can from pharmaceutical industry, from oil and gas, from the NRA. And so I do rely on small dollar donations. My campaign website is drannieandrews.com. It's just drannieandrews.com. And, we are in this last final push of the campaign, and every dollar matters. So thank you for advocating for our campaigns.
You can just.
Okay, and we have one of our guests getting ready to come in, but Judd, if you'll go ahead and let people know how they can give.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you again, Catherine. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Andrews, for your time this evening. It's great to see you again. You can visit my website, juddlarkins.com. That is JUDDLARKINS. And of course, right up at the top, you'll see the big button that says donate. And you click that, and boom, boom, from there on, you're done. And you're helping us reach voters, because that's what this is all about, is about getting the votes and winning these elections so that we can get us some stuff done.
Great, great. Well, I want to welcome, and I hope, Judd, that you and Annie can stay on for a few more minutes, because we have Congresswoman Elaine Luria here to give us a few minutes, and we're so grateful for your time. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Okay, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes.
There you
Well,
are.
good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you for a few minutes. And thank you for everything you do to support Democrats around the country in such tough races. And I'll say, when I first ran in 2018, it made a huge impact for me early out of the gate, and was able to win one of the seats that got us the majority in 18, hold on to a tough seat in 2020 when Democrats around the country lost seats, and we ended up with only a 4-seat majority. So we have a tough fight on our hands, and we're looking to hold these seats, expand in the competitive races where we can, and just glad to be with you tonight.
Well, thank you so very much. And we have here with us our 2 South Carolina candidates who are really doing well in strong races. Annie Andrews, who's running against incumbent Nancy Mace, and Judd Larkins, who's running against incumbent Joe Wilson. So we hope to replace some of your colleagues. So we'll see. We'll do everything we can to make sure that happens. But tell us a little bit about why you think a House majority is important, given the work that you're doing with the Select Committee.
Well, great. Well, thank you for that question, and highlighting the work of the committee. I think that we truly are in a fight for the soul of our democracy. I think when we saw what happened on January 6th, I certainly had a tear in my eye, and I thought to myself, as I could literally hear the rioters outside the building where I had been evacuated because there was a bomb threat outside the Republican headquarters, another bomb threat outside the DNC where the vice president-elect had been only moments earlier, and seeing the images of the violence and the rioters overrunning the Capitol. I said to myself, this is not who we are as a country. This is not how we resolve political differences, through violence. And we have to get to the bottom of why this happened and prevent that in the future. So, I think, and I frequently say to folks, like, imagine that day if Kevin McCarthy had the gavel. We were so close to not having the majority, and the fact that we were able to preserve democracy. Over 100 of our Republican colleagues voted to not certify the election results. I'm running against an opponent who won't say that Joe Biden is the elected president. She'll say things such as, well, he lives in the White House and I wish he didn't. She serves in the Virginia legislature, and there she's one of only 4 state senators who voted for a $70 million budget amendment for a forensic audit of the 2020 election in Virginia, a state that Biden won by 10 points, and there's no hint of election fraud. So, the fact that this continues and it's persistent, that people are still trying to call into question the results of the 2020 election, that they're spreading these election lies, trying to infiltrate at, the state and local level positions that have, oversight of election proceedings and carrying out free and fair elections. It's very dangerous. So I take the work of the committee seriously. We're laying out the facts. We're a congressional committee, so our role is, oversight, and we're, tasked to provide recommendations to prevent something like this from happening in the future. So, obviously, I think it's been a catalyst for what the Department of Justice is doing as far as the speed and, breadth of the investigations. But we are not coordinated with them, but I think everyone in the public is certainly watching closely. And we really do need to make sure that people are held accountable for the violence that day and for trying to undermine our government.
Now I want to give Judd and Annie a chance to ask a quick question of you if they'd like to. Judd, we'll start with you.
Oh, Lord, here. Oh, well, the pressure's on me first here. I was going to get to Annie Andrews so I can wait on her. I know. Thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us here tonight. Sorry that this is the South Carolina show, it looks like.
It's great. I lived in Charleston for a year. Beautiful state. So
I think we all have at some point. It's kind of a rite of passage around here. But thank you again. I'm just going to ask you this because me and Dr. Andrews are both first-time candidates. What advice do you have for us? I know that that's a little bit off topic for what Catherine said, but I think it's relevant for us to hear from someone who is now, I guess, the third go around for you.
So I think that something that you cannot underestimate is like what the face-to-face contact with voters means, whether it's a phone call or knocking doors, especially in a year like this, the turnout, it's a midterm. I can't recall off the top of my head if you have a Senate race in South Carolina this time around. You do? Okay, so we don't in Virginia. So, in my case, we're at the top of the ticket. There's no coordinated campaign. The turnout is on, the congressional races, and then there's local races as well. But, so it is just making sure that you can energize people to also go out and talk to voters. So energizing those volunteers, making the phone calls, knocking the doors. That's how you can make a difference in a tough race. So, obviously you need all of the traditional means of communication, which is, people ask, well, why do campaigns cost so much money? Well, you've got to be on TV, on the radio. If you think about there's 800,000 people in a congressional district, you're personally not going to be able to shake everyone's hand. So you got to get your message out there, and then you have to amplify that with the face-to-face voter contact.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks. Annie?
Sure, yes.
Have a question for your fellow Charlestonian?
That's right. That's right. Well, it's so great to meet you. Thank you for your work on the January 6th committee. And I guess I just want to ask, I'm running in a swing district that went blue in 2018, went back red in 2020. And, I think an issue that crosses party lines, of course, is what happened on January 6th. So you're obviously neck deep in that. How do you boil down that messaging to communicate with independent or moderate Republican voters so they understand really what is at stake if we lose the House?
I think, sort of recapping what I said before about, this is the future of our democracy. And we have to have strong institutions and, faith and public confidence in those institutions. And I find that there's a large group of people, every Republican in Virginia, for example, voted to not certify the election results. I just think that it's an existential threat. Can you imagine what this country would look like if we didn't, operate the way we do with elections and people having a voice at the polls? And there's so many other ways that you can give examples of, trying to take people's voice away from them. A lot of the restrictions on voting that have been implemented in states around the country. We've attempted at the federal level to pass legislation to make sure that everyone has a right to vote. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, for example, is very important. And none of those things that we're doing at the federal level, and some of them we may pass in the House now, but they don't get through in the Senate. That progress is just going to come to a dead halt if we don't keep the majority in the House. And if you think about the fact that the committee is going to produce recommendations, things like strengthening the Electoral Count Act and other legislation and non-legislative things that need to be implemented in order to protect the integrity of our elections and our democratic institutions. Like if Democrats don't have the majority in the House, I don't think that those things are going to be enacted and followed through with. So just in the perspective of that, I think that the committee is doing is very important. And just truly the fact that it's not who we are. I would say that the man who was just sentenced today, who was wearing the Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt, is from our nearby community. And that's just shocking to me that, that someone who became such a face of this insurrection lives just miles from where I do. And our values are so drastically different.
Mhm.
Now, are there any concerns that you have that if the House majority is lost, is the House the place where a lot of this legislation originates? And if so, does that mean if we don't have that the Senate won't be able to overcome that barrier?
Well, I think we need a majority in the House and the Senate to get stuff on the president's desk and get it signed into law. I think that, the House is more forward leaning in introducing legislation on some of these topics. And we have, since we had a Democratic majority in the House in 18 and now again in 20, the Senate, is very evenly divided now, but the Republicans controlled the Senate in 18. Like we have a body of work that we've been passing, Congress after Congress. And if we can keep the majority in the House, grow the majority in the Senate, and, have a Democratic president, we'll be able to get a lot of these things across the finish line. And that's not to mention all of the things that we've done. I mean, the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, which is the largest increase in access to veterans care in any of our lifetimes. I mean, the list is so long of the things that we have already been able to accomplish with the majority we have. So why would we want to slow down, on a track record that I think has been very successful?
Okay, I have a message from one of our folks is trying to get in and they're saying they're having a little issue. So I'm going to work with them for a little bit. Judd, I think Judd has left. So we really appreciate having Judd on board and we appreciate his time. It was great to have him here. Okay, so Annie, now one day next year, you and Congressman Luria will be working together. I feel this in my bones. So what are some of the things that you think maybe two legislators from the South, two women of Congress from the South would be able to work on together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm running because my position in the community as a mom and a pediatrician. And when I launched my campaign, I didn't imagine it would become about restoring women's reproductive freedom. But I think it's never been more clear that we need more women writing laws and we need more healthcare professionals in office in state capitals and in Washington, D.C. So I look forward to becoming part of a majority that can really restore our reproductive freedom, not to mention acting on continuing on the work that's been done on gun violence prevention and addressing climate change, because Congresswoman, you said you've lived here. We are at a real threat to climate change here in the Low Country. Our streets are flooded many, many days, and we have to get serious about that. We're currently represented by a climate science denier in Washington, D.C. I'm ready to fix that.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that point. I mean, sea level rise and recurrent flooding in Norfolk, we, suffer from the same things that you do in Charleston. So, the ability to fight climate change on a broad level to deal with the impacts of climate change through infrastructure investments is very important for, districts like ours.
Okay, I was still trying to help my friend. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But another thing, yeah, we were talking about infrastructure. So, this pretty much goes along that line of, roads and bridges and hospitals and broadband. So are you on any of those committees, Congresswoman, that deal with infrastructure specifically, would you say?
So I'm not on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee per se. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Homeland Security Committee. But every one of those committees has some crossover with those same issues, because not only did the infrastructure bill include the things that you listed, we've also invested in the infrastructure of the Veterans Affairs and aging facilities for our veterans and making sure that we can have the best places and for the best quality of care for them in the future. If you think about the issues of climate change, sea level rise, recurrent flooding, especially in our region, there's provisions every year in the defense bill that approach that. So there really is an overlap between the work that happens in pretty much every committee with regards to infrastructure. And then Homeland Security, it really has a lot to do with the safety of our infrastructure. Within the Homeland Security Committee, I serve on a subcommittee for transportation and maritime security. So that has to do with port security. Transportation also involves the Coast Guard and really the security of our transportation infrastructure. And we've seen some big impacts in those areas when we had the Colonial Pipeline, for example. I think up and down the East Coast last year, we saw the vulnerabilities of some of our infrastructure. So really, every committee, I think, has an overlap with investments in infrastructure and making sure that they meet the needs of our community.
That's a good point. So wherever you are, you're going to be able to have some kind of impact. So the more Democrats that we have there who can continue to work together, the better. Now, can you say anything about working across the aisle? Is that, even though I know that I think it's important to have a Democratic majority, what about working across the aisle? What about people who are always talking about bipartisanship? How is that not more? How should that be more of a focus than?
Well, it's a huge priority for me. I always, seek to work on a bipartisan basis on legislation that I co-sponsor and introduce. So 80% of the legislation that I've co-sponsored is bipartisan. I'm part of two different bipartisan caucuses. One's the Problem Solvers Caucus. So, people might be surprised to know that there's a caucus of about 50 members of the House, equal number Democrats and Republicans, who really work together on these issues. So the bipartisan infrastructure package, it, sort of had its birthplace in the Problem Solvers Caucus, was then, expanded and the package became developed by a bipartisan group of senators and ultimately became law. And another bipartisan caucus that's all veterans, called the Four Country Caucus. So that's important. Our Virginia delegation also works very closely on a bipartisan basis. We may be one of the few that does this, but we meet all 11 members of the House plus both senators very regularly. Every month, our chiefs of staff meet every month. So every other week, there's a full Virginia delegation meeting. And we work on those issues that are really important across the Commonwealth: transportation, environmental issues like health of the Chesapeake Bay. I have a story I love to tell, which surprises people, because I worked with one of my Republican colleagues in Virginia, and he's on the other side of the Chesapeake Bay. So I say, well, I worked across the aisle and across the bay to get major environmental legislation signed into law by President Trump. People kind of pause, they're like trying to figure this sentence out. But we were able to work together and do a 5-year reauthorization for Chesapeake Bay cleanup funding that hadn't been done since 2013. Now that's no longer on the chopping block in the president's budget every year. And it's really a priority that affects our whole region. And it is bipartisan. So there still are those opportunities to work across the aisle. And it's not quite as crazy in DC as you might think from watching the news network.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging. Now, finally, and we've had a couple of people who can't join, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up together. But I would like for people to understand what are the best ways for them to help with the fundraising that you need for your campaign, and why is fundraising important?
Well, fundraising helps us reach voters. As I mentioned earlier, we need to be on TV, on the radio, mailboxes, support our canvassers who are out knocking doors, and not talking on the phones to voters. This is one of the most competitive races in the country. And so overall for the campaign cycle, I still have a ways to go for fundraising, and I've had $4 million dumped against me on TV, and based off of our media market, that's a lot of points, probably as many as anyone in the House, by the Republicans trying to, attack me and try to take back this seat. So if people are interested in supporting the campaign or learning more about the campaign, our website is pretty simple. It's Elaine for Congress.com. So spelled out F-O-R, ElaineForCongress.com. So you can learn more about the campaign there. You can contact us, and of course you can donate.
Yes, yes. So we have a Act Blue page that I'm going to be promoting regularly that allows people to give to all of you, give directly to your campaigns, to your Act Blue campaigns. So it connects the donors to Judd, to Annie, to Congresswoman Elaine. We also have Nikki Bedinsky. She wasn't able to join us, but we have a slot there for people to donate to her. And we've also included Malcolm Frost in Florida, who will be one of our youngest new House representative folks coming in. And your current colleague, Congresswoman Sharice Davids. So all of those folks are together. And if you donate to our Act Blue, that donation will be split among those candidates, unless you want to customize and donate just to Annie, just to Judd, just to Congresswoman Elaine. You'll be able to do that as well. So we'll be promoting that as well as your individual pages. And I want to thank both of you again for your time today and for being part of this virtual event. We want to thank Swain Left for all the support that they're giving us. And I want to give you a chance to have the last word. So Annie, we'll start with you. Any last words that you want to let the public know about?
Just thank you so much for having me, Catherine. I am running in a swing district that just flipped red, and I can win it back, especially in the season of row falling. So every donation helps. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Congresswoman.
Well, thank you as well for being here tonight to join us for this discussion. And there's so many things on the line right now. And if you're already taking time to watch and participate in an event like this, I know that you're invested in making sure that we get the right people to share our values in office. So thank you for being an active participant, in however you can in your community and across the country, whether that's donating or making phone calls or knocking doors, but just getting out the word to make sure that we can elect Democrats and keep a Democratic majority in the House. So thank you, and thanks for your support.
Well, thanks again. We're so honored to have both of you here. So thanks to Dr. Andy Andrews, thanks to Congresswoman Elaine Luria for joining us. Thanks to Judd Larkins, the Congressional Democratic nominee from South Carolina SC 2. Thank you so much to Nikki Bedinsky. We will continue to support and encourage donations to her. And thanks to everyone who joined us tonight and who will be watching as we air this continuously, from my YouTube page and from other pages. And we also want to remind everybody to do everything that you can to support these candidates to make sure that we have a blue House and a blue Senate. So my name is Catherine Fleming Bruce. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you all have a wonderful night.